Good morning. It has often been said that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. And you hear people say this when they're referring to the fact that many people believe this, actually a lot of people believe this, that men and women behave differently and operate differently and communicate differently. And I thought I'd take a little time here at the beginning of this message to weigh in on this debate because I've been lucky in my life. I have worked with exclusively all male groups, and I've also worked with exclusively all female groups. So I believe I have a little bit of insight to share with you on this popular debate. I want to clear the room first, though, and say that I don't believe, some people believe that like only men can get a job done or only women get a job done. That's not the truth. But men and women can get a job accomplished or a task accomplished. Nothing to do with how hardworking they are. But there is a difference. There is a difference between men and women that I've discovered, and that is the way in which they communicate. All right, so we'll start with the guys first. Yes, the men. All right, now it's a common myth that men do not communicate. A lot of ladies believe that. They're like, the guy just doesn't say anything, okay? But men do communicate. They do communicate. They just don't communicate with words. They communicate with this guttural vocalization that we like to call grunts. All right, and I have found by working with all male groups that it's critical to your success as a leader of an all male organization that you be able to decipher and interpret the grunts. All right, so you'll task out a group of guys to do a task, and you'll come up and want to check on them and be like, how are things going, gents? And they'll grunt at you. They might be like, and you know that that's a good grunt. That means things are going well. Or you might come up and say, how are things going? They're like, ugh. And you're like, okay, things are going okay, but they could be better. And then you come up and you ask them how things are going. They're like, ugh. And you're like, okay, things are going really poorly right now. This is not going well. The worst situation I've discovered in my life is when you come up to a group of men and you ask them how things are going. They don't grunt at all. In fact, they just stare at you with a blank stare. And I found out in my life that means one of two very unfortunate incidents has just occurred. A, someone just went to the hospital or is in jail. Or B, something very expensive just got broken or is missing. All right? Let's move on to the ladies. How do ladies communicate? All right, ladies, you communicate with words. A lot of words. Ladies, you like to talk. And then you keep on talking. And even when I'm having trouble listening, you talk some more, all right? I will come into a group of ladies and I will have a task or with an all-female staff, I'll say, this is what I need to get done. And if I gave that task to a group of men, they'll grunt and they want to accomplish the task before lunch. Ladies, if I assign a task, you're like, let's go out to lunch and discuss the problem first. And this is no 30-minute lunch break. This is at least 3 hours. Let me tell you, I've been in these lunch problem discussions sometimes. In the first hour, we discuss how we got to the problem. And the second hour, we discuss the back history of the problem. And the third hour, we discuss all the people associated with the problem. Nowhere in that 3 hours did we discuss any solutions to the problem. And I gotta admit, by the end of the third hour, I can't even remember what the original problem was that I needed fixed. I'm lost in the sauce. I was struggling at where I work and with working with an all-female staff. So Ann, the office manager, she pulled me in the office. She said, Ross, let me help you out here with working with women. And she sat me down. She said, you got to learn something about working with ladies. She said, you need to make two files in your head. One file is the important file, and the other file is the unimportant file. And she said, you got to learn this about women. She's like, some things we say are important, and you need to file that in the important folder and remember that. And she said, other things we say are unimportant, and you file that in the unimportant file, and that's the file you delete at the end of the day, all right? And I didn't say it, but what I really wanted to ask was, Ann, at the end of the day, which file do you think is bigger, the important stuff or the unimportant stuff, all right? In all seriousness, though, if you want to be a leader of a group or work with an organization or really just work in this society, you gotta know your audience. All right, that's how you're a master communicator. You look at your audience and you say, how can I craft or tailor this message for them so they get it? And that includes looking and say, are they men or are they women? All right, and someone who does this really well, of course, is Jesus. I mean, he's a master communicator. All right, and he's very careful when he's looking at an audience, who is my audience and how am I going to get my message across to them? And he even does this in regards to gender. He looks and says, are they men or are they female? If you're ever really bored one night, go through the Gospels, add up all the words Jesus uses when he's speaking to men, and then add up all the words he uses when he speaks to a woman. You're going to find that he uses 50% more words when speaking to a woman. Why? Well, just like we talked about, ladies want a little bit more clarification, more specifics, more details. They want to be sat down and have things explained to them. And when he speaks to men, he's quick, he's short, and he's oftentimes he's witty. Right? Because men want short, quick responses. So he's crafting his narrative, he's crafting his message to what gender he's speaking to. He's very keyed into that. We see that in this gospel today. Right? When Martha storms into the room and she's very angry, what does he say? Martha, Martha, let's sit down and talk about the problem, right? He doesn't just say, Martha, stop worrying about it. He says, I want you to come in and let's sit down and let's speak about this. Let's dialogue about this, right? He understands that that's what she's going to require, all right? Now, he does this a lot with women throughout the Gospels. In fact, he's always, when women come up to him, he's speaking to them as peers and as equals, speaks to them with dignity and respect. He even invites them along in his own ministry. He's always taking the time to sit down and speak to women on this level. And I'll tell you guys, I think we as Americans in 2025, we actually miss out on some of the power and significance of that act, of sitting down with these ladies and talking to them and explaining things to them. And why do we miss out on that? Because you relate to this story too well. And some of you are looking at me, you're like, Ross, you're usually telling me the reason I don't get the gospel is because I don't relate to it. Now you're telling me I relate to this story too well. Well, yeah, you relate to this story really well because we've all been in this situation. You know, this might have actually occurred for some of you last night, right? Where you got the hard-working woman in the house and she's trying to get things done and we're sort of sitting around not doing anything and she storms in and says, hey, will no one help me? Does everybody see I got all this work to do and you're not coming and helping me, right? And what do? We say, can we talk about this? Like, let's sit down, let's have a dialogue, like we can be civil in this discussion. Don't hit me over the head with the frying pan, please. Right? We've all lived this, so we get it. We relate to these stories. But of course you relate to it. You're a 21st century American. You live in a society where women have rights and are equals and peers and must be treated with the dignity and respect we give to men. Where we have to speak with women and discuss these things. And we forget that this particular gospel story, guys, occurred 2,000 years ago in a time and location called first century Judea where women have no rights and they are not peers and they are not treated with the dignity and respect owed to men. Women can't even speak to men in public in this time period. Women are considered property. Think about the Jewish wedding rite. We think of our wedding rite where the father leads the bride down the aisleway, and it's a very beautiful, emotional moment. But when first century Judea, the father owned the daughter, and he's handing her off like a property transaction to the groom because the husband will now own the woman. Women are property in first century Judea. Women are not allowed to protest. Oh, it's too much work for me. I'm unhappy. And women are certainly not allowed, like in this gospel, as we see, to run into a room and say, hey, you're a guy, and I'm unhappy with my station in life, and I'm unhappy that I have to do all this work, and Mary, my sister's not helping me. That's unheard of. And so because we relate to this story so well, we forget that this occurred 2,000 years ago, and this story is quite literally amazing. It's astonishing. It's socially groundbreaking. That Jesus allows this woman to be angry and vent her frustrations and says, let's talk about it. And dare I use the word, I would say this story and every other interaction Jesus ever has with a woman is miraculous. And I'm going to use, this is my own term, okay? This is not endorsed by any church, seminary, or theologian. It is Rostrack's term, my opinion. All right, I'm going to say that all the interactions Jesus has with women in the Gospels, where he treats them as peers and equals, treats them with the dignity and respect they deserve, when he sits down and explains things to them, invites them on his ministry, they are the silent miracles of the gospel. That's my own term, the silent miracles of the gospel. And we as Americans have trouble really seeing it that way, because we live in a world where, guess what? The miracle is reality. The miracle is reality now. And so sometimes, and I got a professional historian in the congregation, so I got to be careful here. The problem is, as when we're president in 2025, we think that people 2,000 years ago thought like we did. And we forget, no, they thought differently. And so I know some of you are looking at me like, I don't know, Ross. I mean, is it really a miracle? I mean, yes, the way Jesus treats women with respect and dignity, I agree, that's astonishing, that's amazing, that's groundbreaking. But you're saying a miracle is when you like walk on water, or you give a blind man sight, or you raise someone from the dead, right? You defy the very laws of nature and physics. Why can't miracles also be when we defy very stringent, strict social norms and customs that are literally written in stone? And this is where we forget that in 2025, where we live in America, where we have relative social mobility, right? You can move up and down the social ladder, right? Where you are born doesn't mean where you're going to end, doesn't necessarily imply where you're going to end up. We forget that 2,000 years ago, the social customs and structure of that society is a brick wall, and you can't scale over it, and you can't tunnel under it, and you can't blow a hole in it. So if you're born poor, you end up poor. And if you're a woman when you're born, you're going to be a piece of property for the rest of your life, and you're going to do whatever a man tells you to do. And we also forget that those social systems 2,000 years ago, it's not like today where you can have the First Amendment right and protest and voice your opinion. Those social structures 2,000 years ago, they had teeth. And they weren't above using violence to make sure you stayed where you were meant to be in the pecking order. Hollywood does a terrible job of this. They always come out with these movies about the ancient world, and they say, this is very historically accurate. And then they always do this. They put a strong female lead in the movie, and she's like the personification of feminist values. And so you watch this movie, and there will, of course, be at some point the king rides down the road with his retainers, and there's the strong female lead in the road, and the king says, get out of the way, woman. And she turns around, she's like, I am a strong, free-thinking, independent woman, and you are not going to tell me what to do, right? And, of course, audiences love this, and we cheer. We're like, go, girl, like, you got it, right? And, guys, it gets it into our head that somehow that happened. It never happened. It's a myth. It's a falsehood. If that had occurred 2,000 years ago, they would have immediately grabbed that woman and torn her tongue out, ripped her tongue out. They might have even beheaded her, right? They were not above using violence to keep women controlled. And so when we have this story where Jesus goes out and speaks to women in public, and women speak with him and invites them along, invites them to pray. And when they're angry, he says, let's talk about it. Guys, they are defying death. They are defying death. Just like you defy death when you walk on water through the power of God. They're defying public shame. Martha, just think if someone reported her and said she was angry with someone and a man was present in the room. The crime back then, tongue gets ripped out. That happened, right? So she's defying death. It is miraculous in the way in which Jesus always treats these women with the respect and equality they deserve. I'll end this message with a personal story. I'm going to try and really make this very real, how miraculous I see these interactions. 2013, 2014 timeframe, I spent some time in Afghanistan. If you know anything about Afghanistan, they're at the very bottom of the list for women's rights. Okay, the best way to describe that place is it's biblical. It's like living in the Old Testament. So women are property. Women have no rights. They got to walk around completely covered with a burqa, right? And they do all the work. Men don't do any work. They do all the work for the house. They carry the water and they feed animals. They take care of the kids. They do all that type of stuff. I witnessed outside of a small village once, there was a woman. and she was coming back from the village well. She was carrying water back to her hut, her home. And she had a yoke on her, and hanging from the yoke were these two large clay urns that she was carrying the water in. And she was walking up a small incline, so she was bowed under the weight of this water. And as she was walking up the hill, a man riding a donkey was coming towards her on the same little goat path. All right, the man's riding this donkey. Now in Afghanistan, the woman must make way for the man. She must get off to the side of the road, even though she's got a gigantic burden with these gigantic clay urns of water. She's got to get off to the side of the road to allow the man to pass. But she's got her head down. She can't see him. She's tired. And so she keeps walking, and the man, as he approaches, realizes he's going to, unless they want to have a collision, he pulls his donkey off to the side of the road. And he watches her as she passes him. And then, once she's a little bit past him, he calmly dismounts from his donkey. And he takes a donkey whip, and he walks up behind her, and he begins to brutally flog her from behind. And I hear the man counting in Pashto. He's like 1, 2. And why would he be counting? Because she committed a crime in their society. She had to get off the road for him, and she did not. And so now he is executing justice on her. And when he gets to about 20 or 30 floggings, I can't remember, he stops. And the yoke crashes from the woman's shoulders. And these clay urns of water smash, and the water spills across the desert sands. And on the 30th flogging, she drops into the dirt in a heap. And the man is just calmly returns to his donkey, gets back on it, and keeps on riding away. And she's lying there in a heap on the ground with the broken clay urns around her. 2 children come up, 2 little boys, and they see this woman crumpled in the dirt, and they pick up stones, and they begin to pelt her with it while she's down on the ground. Why would they do that? Why would they exhibit this cruelty? This was in 2013, 2014, like a little over 10 years ago. They're doing that because they've been taught that. Remember I said these social customs and norms are in stone. And they've been taught since birth. Women do whatever the man says. And if they disrespect the man in any way, you beat them and use physical abuse. These small children are pelting her with stones. She's down on the ground. She can't move. And then 2 women come up. And surely fellow women would help her out. No. They begin to scream at her and kick dust on her. Why? Because she committed a crime in their society. In their society, she has no rights. She can't do anything. She can't protest it. She committed a crime against that man. And that whole society is going to turn on her and humiliate and beat her. And now, if I haven't already tugged on your heartstrings, I'll really break your heart. She gets up finally after everybody leaves, and she begins to crawl around painfully on the ground, and she's picking up the pieces of the clay urns, the broken clay urns, and trying to hold them, and trying to stumble back to her home. And you know, this is the real sad part. She knows when she gets home and she presents to her husband the broken clay urns and the fact that she doesn't have any water for that evening, guess what he will do to her? He'll punish her by beating her again. He'll use physical abuse on her again. And she committed a crime in their society. She can't do anything about this. Now, I want you to put yourselves in that woman's position. Think you're that woman lying there in the dirt, and there's nothing you can say. There's nothing you can do. This is the world you live in. This is the world you've been born into. This is all you know. You've been publicly shamed, humiliated, physically traumatized, and you're about to face more physical abuse. I want you to think, what if a man came up to you, a man, and his name was Jesus of Nazareth? And while you're lying in the dirt there, trying to crawl around and pick up these pieces of this clay urn, what if this man came up to you and wrapped his arms around you and comforted you, healed your wounds, spoke to you not as a piece of livestock or property, but as a human, as an independent, free-thinking person, spoke to you like you were a child of God and said it's going to be okay? And what if he picked you up and carry you not back to a home where more physical abuse would occur, but to a place of safety. Jesus did this probably thousands of times throughout his ministry with women in the first century AD. And I want you to imagine if that had been you a little over 10 years ago, and Jesus in Nazareth was there picking you up and carrying you and comforting you. Look me in the eyes and tell me that you wouldn't say in that moment, "This is a miracle." Amen.